Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2012 remake Red Dawn. More like Red Yawn, because this film is one big, giant, massive bore. This is such a boring, generic, forgettable film. This is honestly one of the most generic, forgettable remakes that have ever disgraced the screen. It's directed by a guy named Dan Bradley, and this is the first film that he's ever directed, and it was also his last, so that's saying quite a bit. Yes, there are some instances where you have a director who directs one movie, but then decides never to direct again because of other reasons, and it's not necessarily due to what they showcased in terms of their ability. The director of Shoot 'em Up is a prime example of this. But this isn't one of those instances. You can tell that this guy was not cut out for this, that he just couldn't hack it, because this is just really pathetic direction. There's barely any ingenuity or imagination when it comes to the camera angles or the techniques that are on display. It's a very plain and very play it safe and to the vest. And I think that's mainly because of the limitations of the director. The action sequences, they all have the same amount of adrenaline, which is next to none. The sequences that just involve various different characters chatting with one another or bonding looks like something straight out of the CW. It does not have an epic size or scope to it in any capacity. It looks like a TV show. It looks like a TV movie. Like maybe like the pilot of a TV series that has a little bit bigger budget than the rest of the episodes of the show. That's really what you get with the Red Dawn remake. Complete with some really chintzy, bad looking CGI early on, and just a lot of moments that just don't really impress visually. Um, to give credit to Dan Bradley, like he realized that this wasn't for him, and he went immediately back to doing second unit directing and stunt work and stunt coordination, and I think that definitely was for the best. And he still had a pretty lengthy career, even after his involvement in this misfire of a movie. So it's not one of those things where he is just completely incapable of doing any semblance of direction. He seems to be a pretty decent second unit director because he keeps getting work, but when it comes to like the main guy behind the camera, no, he just didn't have it. He couldn't get the best performances out of his cast. He couldn't really handle the ship that well when it comes to him being the captain of it. Um, and also, maybe he might have decided to go back to being second unit director because maybe he just didn't really like the experience. That could be it too. Especially when it comes to directing a film for a company that was in a financial freefall like MGM. I mean, it got to the point where the film wasn't even released until 3 years after he finished completing it. So even if the film did okay, as far as the industry goes, he did it already. He did it 3 years ago, so he's already 3 years behind all these other directors who the studios might be looking for in terms of giving them a job. Um, so it was just a bad situation all the way around, and also, in all honesty, it was just a bad idea. This was just not needed. You didn't need a Red Dawn remake, especially one that just didn't really do anything that new or different with the pre-existing IP. There wasn't a massive demand for it either, so it's just one of those things where it's just a misguided, ill-fated project from the very beginning. And honestly, probably no matter who you had behind the camera, you probably would have wound up getting similar results. But I do have to believe that a better director would have helped this be a little bit better. And definitely a film that is a little bit more watchable, because there's so much about this direction that is just, it's fundamentally bad. It really is, in terms of the framing in some shots, in terms of the way that things are set up, in terms of how the director is using a particular technique, or how the director is setting up an angle or using pans or zooms. Like, it's just not a well directed movie. And the script is pretty shitty too. I mean, the script by Carl Ellsworth and Jeremy Passmore. Like, Carl Ellsworth before this was on a roll. He did screenplays for Red Eye, Disturbia, and the Last House on the Left remake. All three of those screenplays, I think, are actually pretty solid. Some pretty good work. And then he did the script for this, and he just fell off a cliff. The other script that he did was Unhinged, and that wasn't that much better. Maybe Jeremy Passmore. He was passing the doobie to himself a few many times, and that's why the script was so bad. It wasn't necessarily entirely the fault of the more established screenwriter in Carl Ellsworth, but whoever is to blame here, they really dropped the ball. They really did a bad job, and just botched this, just completely botched this script. For one, there's moments where it talks down to the original, because you have that whole scene where Matt, well, it's not Matt, it's, well, Matt's there along with Jed, but they're there with Robert, and they kill a deer, and they do the whole bit where they share the blood of the deer with Robert and get him to drink the blood. But then they're like, oh, we were just kidding. Like, we didn't mean any of that shit about it being the spirit of the animal and that it's tradition. You actually drank that shit. Like, that is talking down to the fans of the original. That's basically like, oh, remember that one scene in the original movie? Look how stupid that was. That is never a good sign when a screenplay has moments in it where it's literally talking down to the original, especially a remake. And there's just a lot of stuff in this that is just nowhere near as impactful or as intense or as gripping as the story of the screenplay from the original film, or just any film, to be honest. There's the bare minimum in terms of character depth early on, and not a ton after, other than some characters are in relations with one another. That's it. Other than like Jed having a girlfriend and Matt having a girlfriend, and this one other Wolverine side character also having a girlfriend. Other than that, there's nothing in terms of extra depth for some of these characters. Robert, like, his character was so complex and dynamic in the original, and here he's just like any other member of the team. The female characters, they take away their trauma. Now they're just fine. One girl was in a camp for a little bit, but then got rescued by her boyfriend. But there really isn't anything in terms of depth for them, other than them just being romantically involved with some of the two main characters in the movie. The villains, I don't even remember the names of any of these characters. And to be fair, I barely remember the names of the villains in the original. And I will give the writers credit for this moment where you have the main leader of the invading force of North Koreans actually shoot one of the Wolverine's parents in cold blood. You actually have him shoot Matt and Jed's dad. Uh, okay, so now you have a direct connection with this guy. But other than that, it's still a very bland, uninteresting character. So you give that character something that connects them directly to our main cast of Wolverines, but you don't do anything with it in the end. You don't provide any extra depth. You don't provide anything interesting in terms of why this particular character is involved in this conflict and what his thoughts are, and whether or not he's conflicted about anything that's going on. You don't have the interesting a side character like one of the villains, the Cuban guy in the original, who was having second thoughts. You don't have anything like that in this screenplay. Instead, you have a whole sequence where the Wolverines uh, uh, take some food out of a subway. we'll focus on that and we'll put a lot of attention to that, but we're not going to put a lot of attention to things that would actually make this remake feel like it's at all worth a shit. And originally the invading force was Chinese, but then they decided to change it to North Korea. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it was Chinese or North Korean. It does None of that really matters because the way that this invading force is written, they never really come across like that much of a threat. Because the Wolverines pretty much, make things difficult for them pretty easily. I will say that there's a little bit of I don't know, a little bit more where they're able to hold their own against the Wolverines better than the original, but only by a little bit. It's not by a significant amount. And there's a lot of moments in the script where it just feels like, okay, we're literally just making the same movie, but we're just doing a very half-assed job of it. So you have to still have the brother dynamic between Jed and Matt, but this time around it's this antagonistic back and forth, which is very off-putting. Where initially you might have had a bit of that going on in the original, but then that was pretty much put aside pretty quickly. A good chunk of the runtime is this whole cliched bullshit involving Jed and Matt and how Jed left Matt when he was younger and left him to deal with the drama or the trauma of the family going through a divorce or something along those lines. And I'm like, who gives a shit? Leave this shit for the fucking CW teen soap operas. What? I don't give a crap about that. And there's this whole conflict as well with Matt, who he wants to rescue his girlfriend and he wants to do whatever it takes. And there's one sequence where he sees her on a bus and he acts impulsively and goes and ruins the plans that the Wolverines had for that day, trying to save his girlfriend. It results in somebody dying, some faceless and honestly might as well be nameless member of the Wolverines. And there's supposed to be this conflict that might be brewing between Matt and this other girl who was romantically involved with the guy who died, but she gets over it real quick. So it's like, okay, why even bring any of that drama up if it's just resolved so quickly? And she's just like, peace. You're like, okay, all right, what was even the point with this? Just padding. I will give I'll give the script some credit for a few other things. Some of the stuff involving Matt and Jed's dad, him being a police officer, I thought kind of added extra dynamic to things. Um, and him being a police officer led to a moment at the end, which I kind of didn't mind because it was set up pretty well early on because of the fact that he was a police captain. And I do like the fact that with the other guy, I think was it Captain Howard, I think? Yeah, no, it's Tanner. Sergeant Major Andrew Tanner. So with the character in the original Red Dawn played by Powers Booth, the pilot. Here you have that same kind of character, but he has two other Marines with him. So that's actually taking something that was referenced in the original, which is a team of military guys who were trying to locate and find the Wolverines. I think it was like a team of SEALs or something. It actually does take that and does something with it. So that's one instance of the script actually trying to do something a little different, but it's too little too late because that doesn't even come into play until pretty much an hour into the movie, and the movie's an hour and a half, so it's pretty much over by the time that those three get integrated into the plot. I think they should have been integrated into the plot earlier. I think there should have been more of those characters because it's actually a different dynamic and it's actually kind of interesting. There is another thing that it does differently with how it handles Jed. Yes, I know Jed and Matt didn't technically make it out alive at the end of the original either, but the way that it was handled, they died off screen and they died in each other's arms. So it just had a certain emotional weight to it that I felt was rather effective. Here, Jed gets shot randomly in the head by a sniper, and then Matt goes on to be the leader of the Wolverines and starts this insurgency plan to break out the people from the camps and utilize them to take back the town. And it doesn't work at all because of the way that Matt was written as a character. Matt was unlikable. The way Matt was written, he was written as selfish and not deserving of being the leader of the Wolverines, not deserving of having this redemptive arc. It did a really bad job in terms of making it feel like this redemptive arc was something that was earned. And it also doesn't help either that Josh Peck is just an absolutely miserable actor in this. He is so fucking bad. So anything involving this character just comes across as pouty and just annoying. And then when he's trying to be tough, it's laughable. Honestly, if you wanted to take the shocking route, just shoot him in the head, and then Jed is the one that remains, or kill one of the girlfriends. Like not like they were that strong of characters to begin with. There's different things you could have done and have like an extra like shock moment than kill off the honestly the only good character in the entire script, other than other than the Marines. I didn't mind those guys. And there's some other stuff involving the bad guys, the North Koreans, and the way that they communicate, and how that incorporates into the climax, where they go to the police station and try to take their communication device. Like, I didn't mind that either, because that was actually kind of cool. I thought with the whole trying to do this mission to take their communication and then use it against them, created some decent bits of tension. It led to an all right final fight between the main leader, the general of the invading forces, who shot and killed Matt and Jed's dad, and Jed gets to shoot him. You fuck with the wrong family. Like, it's like there was some stuff with that I didn't mind, but like I said, even with the things that do work, it's just so inconsistent and it's so just lazily written. And even the initial invasion doesn't really have the same impact as the original, because you have like a football scene earlier that's set up in a way where it's got a lot of hard hits and all this other stuff, and you don't really get a good sense of a calm before the storm kind of thing, like the original. And also it happens while they just get woken up. They go to sleep and they wake up, and then all this shit is all hell is breaking loose. And I'm like, that just isn't as effective to me as them being like in a place of comfort and safety that they wouldn't expect anything to happen, which is at their local high school. Um, and even things just like saying Wolverines just comes across as hollow. Like the whole scene where they're going Wolverines, Wolverines, like that was a genuine, memorable moment in the original. Here, it's just like you're just doing that because it was in the original. Like there's a lot of that in this, and there's too many characters. It's like the original already had a little too much in terms of the amount of characters, so it's kind of hard to follow at times and hard to really get into the cast as a whole, because there wasn't a ton of time to provide all of them with adequate depth. And here they have even more. So I'm like, What are we doing? Why do we have even more characters? That doesn't help. That actually makes things worse. And the ending is completely unsatisfying. It just feels like they just ran out of money and they ran out of time, or the writers were just like, ah, fuck it, I guess that's good enough. And it's not like, this is going to be a huge hit. Like, nobody really wants this. I'm just doing this for a paycheck. So let's just end it here. Matt makes a speech and they attack the compound where the prisoners are held. The prisoners escape. One guy grabs an American flag. They're running towards the camera. They're going to take back the city. And then that's it. So you don't even really know whether or not they won. It just ends. You're like, okay. At least in the original, you knew that they eventually won the war. You don't even get any of that here. You don't even know if they won to begin with. For all you know, the next sequence after that could have been the North Korean forces just gunning everybody down and killing everybody. And then they just take back the stronghold and take even further control of the town, because they don't tell you anything. They don't tell you whether or not they even won the war. And it being set outside of Colorado, like it being set in a different state, in Spokane in the Pacific Northwest, adds jack shit and has nothing to this story, because they don't do anything with that in terms of the setting. It's just a different setting now. It's not like it really it is integral to anything in regards to the overall script or this or the story. And the cast, this cast sucks. Chris Hemsworth, I kind of tolerate him in this. He has a bit of charm, he has some charisma, but there's almost only so much that he can do with such a limited and just really uh, uh, piss poor screenplay. And it just seems like he's imitating Patrick Swayze too much in terms of his cadence and line delivery, like right down to how he's saying certain lines. It literally sounds like he just saw Red Dawn, or he was asked to watch Red Dawn and then try to do his best Patrick Swayze impression. So that doesn't help either when it comes to his performance. But even him doing his best Swayze impression is significantly better than what Josh Peck brings to the film as Matt. Josh Peck is pathetic. He is so bad in this. His acting is atrocious. He's got the pouty shit going on, the stink face. He's got there are lines where he's supposed to sound tough and intimidating, and it's anything but. Like the whole speech at the end when he's all like, "Oh, I'm not going to promise you that it's going to be good, but we're going to fight and but or die trying." It just sounded forced. It was laughable. I don't know what they were thinking casting him in this role. Charlie Sheen, in his first ever acting performance, just ran circles around Josh Peck, and he had been acting for a while in the industry before he got this role. This just was try hard and just embarrassing. It really was an embarrassing performance. What are you trying to do being a high school quarterback? Go back to Drake and Josh, man. What the hell is this? Stick to sitcoms. That's where your limit is, because you cannot fucking act at all when it comes to playing this kind of role, a serious role where you're not trying to be comic relief or a comic foil for somebody else. Like, get the fuck out of here with this shit, Josh Peck. And He had zero chemistry with Chris Hemsworth. I did not buy that they were brothers at all. I didn't even buy that they were even remotely friends or were at all characters that had any semblance of chemistry or even familial connection. I didn't even buy that they were cousins. Josh Hutcherson isn't much better as Robert. I mean, C. Thomas Howell was awesome. He was great in Red Dawn. Josh Hutcherson as this character, his character is just I wear a dumb looking hat. That's about it. That's all his character is. He doesn't like you take Robert and you just make him into this joke, this pathetic joke of a character. It didn't even make sense as to why he all of a sudden was really good with a gun. It made sense in the original because he was fueled by hate and revenge, and he didn't have anything better to do. So he just, that he turned that hate and that need for revenge into something to motivate him to become a good soldier. You don't really get any of that with Josh Hutcherson. He just comes across like a fresh-faced kid who just wandered onto the set and they just gave him a gun. Adrianne Palicki as Tony, Isabel Lucas as Erica, Alyssa Diaz as Julie. More of the same. Hey, hey, you're done shooting that CW show, right? Okay, do you have time to do a little bit of shooting for the Red Dawn remake? Okay, all right, we're gonna give you a little bit of money. Just come on the set and we'll work it out later. And Connor Cruz is Daryl Jenkins, just cruising through all his scenes on cruise control. Bland as hell in terms of his performance. Brett Cullen, not bad as Tom Eckert in the few scenes that he was in. Edwin Hodge as Danny, just as memorable, just as strong as the Danny performance in the original. Same thing with Julian Alcaraz as Greg. What about Will Yun Lee as Captain Cho, the main antagonist? What can I really say about this performance? He looked kind of menacing at times. That's it. He had barely any lines of dialogue, knew nothing about him, so there's nothing you could really latch onto as a viewer or anything you could really criticize that strongly because he just was there. He was on the set. He was on the call sheet. You got Michael Beach, who played Mayor Jenkins, who looks like Steve Harvey hosting the Family Feud. I'm like, what the hell are you doing here, Steve? Don't you have the Family Feud to be hosting right now? Like, why are you trying to be a mayor of Spokane? And there's really not anything else to say about the rest of the cast. Oh yeah, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and Matt Gerald and Kenneth Choi. Okay, I'll mention those three. Jeffrey Dean Morgan was good as Tanner, and his like 5 scenes. So yeah, it's not a good cast either. And the cinematography by Mitchell Admonson definitely wasn't awe-inspiring. Wasn't I wouldn't say it was entirely incredibly incompetent, but it definitely wasn't anything that impressive. It definitely wasn't anything that really stood out, made you think fondly about it. The editing is the same way by Richard Pearson. At times during some of the action, it's pretty bad because there's a bunch of shaky cam and quick cuts. The music by Ramin Djawadi, just a lot of loud noises and not anything that really creates a patriotic mood, not anything that creates a sinister mood, not anything that comes close to what Basil Poledouris brought to the original. Like, it was so generic and bland and boring when it comes to the music composition that you might as well not even had a score to begin with. And the film's like 93 minutes and it drags somehow because there's little to no investment in the plot, because most of these characters are either cannon fodder with no personality and no charm, no charisma, or they're just there, or they're unlikable, like Matt. Matt is such an unlikable character in this. And you don't root for him, so it doesn't help that he's a major focus of the script. And the antagonists are somehow even weaker and more forgettable than the antagonists in the original. So they don't improve upon that weakness when it comes to the original film. And there are some different things that they do. Like there's that whole bit with one of their own who has the tracker, but then they just let him go. But then they don't really do anything with that character later. I think maybe he gets shot off screen, but I'm not entirely sure. So they did something different. Instead of him getting shot by Robert, they let him go. Okay, but they still don't really capitalize fully on that whole character and what he could potentially do in a climactic sequence in terms of him having a redemptive arc. He just goes peace out, and that's it. The stuff with the captain of the North Korean army shooting the Jed and Matt's dad, providing some actual connection between the main antagonist and the leads. The involvement of the military, Marine guys coming in and helping out. But other than that, like there isn't anything that really provides like an extra amount of intrigue or captivates you in any way. It makes you go, "Oh, I want to see where this is going." And if there is anything, they just they bring it up and they forget about it, and then they just go back to the same generic bullshit that didn't work before. So it's just a really painfully just bad movie. It's a bad film. It's red yawn. It's white bread dawn because it's just as generic and just as filling as two slices of white bread. It's just one of those things where this just flat out was a misfire all the way around. It was a dud, a pretty massive one. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the Red Dawn remake. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.